The fourth dimensional Bleach debate has been a point of discussion since the beginning of time, and no one can ever come to an agreement on it. I'm here to tell you Bleach is way beyond fourth dimensional. The community, due to biases and lack of knowledge, continuously rejects the notion of higher dimensional Bleach, which I will no longer let slide. What I will be doing today is going over the arguments and evidence that are in support of not only fourth dimensional Bleach, but low complex multi as well. I'm going to be honest and say that I will not be holding back on any of my scaling, so you guys can understand the full scope of where you could possibly scale the Bleach first. When you take into account all the information we have available, the argument can be made that the Cosmology qualifies for low 1C. The way I'll be breaking down this topic is by three major categories, which is 1. Whether or not the Bleach Cosmology consists of fourth dimensional structures, and can you truly argue the verse qualifies for low 1C? 2. These characters scale to the Cosmology and how. The third category are the specific statements that everyone all knows and loves, and the evidence supporting those statements. So make sure to stick around for this entire video. Before we even get into the Bleach scaling, I first want to say that there are multiple different interpretations of what the fourth dimension is, because we as people in reality don't truly know what it is and if it even exists. There are still ongoing debates and theories about what the fourth dimension is, but there are generally two interpretations you see in fiction. One of which is that the fourth dimension is time, which is one of the most widely accepted theories of the fourth dimension. This idea was popularized by Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, which treats time as a dimension similar to space. In Einstein's theory, space-time is a fourth dimensional continuum in which events are described by coordinates in both space and time. The other interpretation is that the fourth dimension is a higher dimensional space. In mathematics, the concept of higher dimensional space refers to space with more than 3 spatial dimensions. While we cannot directly perceive higher dimensional space, mathematicians use it in various fields, including geometry and topology. An example of this would be a fourth dimensional hypercube, also known as a tesseract, which is a geometric figure analogous to a cube but with 4 dimensions. The interpretation that Kubo uses for his fictional verse is quite obviously that space and time together make a fourth dimensional structure, and the inclusion of general relativity. It's stated verbatim in the novels. Now, there are differences within the Bleach Cosmology that Kubo mentions, but as for now, you guys know exactly what I mean when I say the fourth dimension. So the Bleach Cosmology is a macrocosm that consists of a multiverse of low 2C space-times. These space-times are displaced across and separated by an extra dimensional space that allows them to exist in parallel. Additionally, there are larger space-times that encompasses the multiverse and the extra dimensional space. The lesser space-times each have their own temporality, separate from the time dimension of the extra dimensional space. This is because each individual space-times are stated and shown to have their own time axes, and because these extra dimensional spaces is stated to be cut off from and separate the time and space of the other dimensions. This might be confusing, so I'm going to simplify and correlate these terms to these specific dimensions. The world of the living, soul society, and the other dimensions are space-time continuums. Various pieces of evidence postulate the idea that the world of the living is based off our real universe. Not only the fact that there are the same locations that exist in reality, including celestial bodies like Mars and Jupiter, but the scientific studies we also know to exist, like astrology, which is not really scientific, and the scientists that exist in the verse have discovered and made the theory of general relativity in the verse, which means they are capable of observing and analyzing their universe in the same way we can. So logically, at the basic level, the paradigm of the world of the living would be the same as our universe. Additionally, Eisen states that he would cause distortion in time-space. Kenpachi was able to tear through time-space fabric, along with the multiple other statements of space and time. The Soul Society is stated to be a parallel dimension to the world of the living and two sides of the same coin. So we would be led to believe that the basic attributes of the universe would apply to the Soul Society. So how do we know that the Soul Society and world of the living are separate space-time continuums with their own timelines? For 3 specific reasons. 1, they are stated to exist separately and independently from each other. It's to the point where they can't exist in the same universe because their very material makeup can't coexist. The second reason is because they're stated and shown to have separate time axes. It's stated that the time axis of the Soul Society and the world of the living went out of sync, therefore causing a time gap to happen between the 2 dimensions. So this means that the Soul Society and world of the living each have their own time axis. The thing is that they are both synchronized, meaning the time flows are at the same rate. This is also supported by the fact that the Soul Society and world of the living are represented by 2 separate paths. When Ichigo and friends were thrown off the time axis, they were sent back in time when they entered the Soul Society. This isn't the only occurrence of the Cleaner sending things back in time, and that leads us to my third reason. The Dongai. The Dongai is a dimension that is isolated from the Soul Society, world of the living, and even time and space. It's stated to connect and separate both of these dimensions. This means that the Soul Society and world of the living can be argued to be separated space-time dimensions just based on this fact. Being separated and isolated by a structure that is isolated from the time and space of each respective dimension would have to mean that each dimension has their own spatial temporal axes that they do not share. They cannot physically share a time axis. In conclusion, what this means is that each dimension is their own own 4D space-time continuum, but this is just the beginning. Before I continue, I know some people will be questioning the validity and canonicity of some of the scans I've used so far. I want y'all to know that the Gaia Uprising arc is indeed a canon arc. A majority of the filler arcs in Bleach are provably canon, but I'm focusing on this arc for today's video. The reason why it's canon is because the literal plot line that happens in the arc is mentioned in the canon novel Spirits Are Forever With You. It states, as Ashiro's idea to improve souls would eventually be taken up by Yushima Oko, which is the major villain in the arc. This man pressed forward with the research of mod souls and Spearhead, but the program was frozen by Central 46. In the end, one of the mod souls, Nozami, would escape and meet a certain Soul Reaper agent, Ichigo, in Karakura Town, but that's a different story. So as you can see, they literally depict what happened in the arc in this novel. But that's not all, because a specific Zanpakuto that is only seen during this arc and only could have been seen during this timeline was mentioned in the Campfire World novel. Shinji Hiriko mentions the Zanpakuto Arato Meshigiri, which is the Zanpakuto Nozami uses in the anime. Additionally, in the Spirits Are Forever With You plotline for BBS, they mention things that happen in this arc plenty of times. So this arc is indeed canon. So now we can actually move on. Now that I've proven that the Bleach realms are space-time continuums, my next point is that parallel space-time continuums are separated by a fifth dimensional axis. To put this into perspective, two one-dimensional objects require a two-dimensional space to exist in parallel, which means that two-dimensional objects require a three-dimensional space to exist in parallel. In the third diagram, we have a space-time continuum depicted as a line composed of endless static representations of three-dimensional space extending to the past, present, and future states of a universe. In this model, three-dimensional spaces could exist in parallel, non-intersecting states when displaced across different time periods. And finally, fourth-dimensional space-times would have to be displaced across a fifth dimension to maintain their non-intersectionality. As stated in the Versus Battle Wiki's tiering system, the distance between any number of universes is embedded in a higher dimensional, higher order spaces. And the distance between two timelines is defined as the fifth dimension or a fourth spatial dimension that separates two or more universes. But just because a multiverse is composed of multiple space-time continuums doesn't mean the cosmology is low 1c, and a lot of people fail to understand that. To scale to low 1c, the space between timelines either needs evidence of having qualitative superiority or quantitative superiority on account of being infinite in size and therefore infinitely larger than a fourth dimensional space-time. This would be the Cartesian product model of a low 1c hyper timeline. The construction of the multiverse consists of 4 dimensions of space, 3 of which are significant, and 2 dimensions of time. Under such a cosmology, you would need to prove that the lesser space-times have their own temporality separate from the time dimension of the extra dimensional space. As I've stated before in the microcosm of Bleach, the individual space-time have their own time axes, which is the most straightforward way of proving low 1c hyper timelines. Since we have a confirmation that the lesser timelines have their own time axes, such a construction can only be described as a cosmology with 2 temporal dimensions, possibly 3 if we include the Garganta, but I'm going to talk about that later. Not only do we have logical arguments proving that the Bleach verse consists of the 5th dimension, we have verbatim statements from character within the verse that proves this to be the case as well. Kisuke Uruhara, one of the most knowledgeable characters in the verse, states that there is a hyperspace between the world of the living and Soul Society, and he's talking about the Dongai. Hyperspace in this context would simply mean a space with a higher dimensional order. This solidifies what I've stated earlier. What separates two space-time continuums must be a higher order space. Not only that, Ichigo is blatantly seen traveling from present to past and past to present within the cleaner. 2 Ichigos were existing at the same time because the time axis of the Dongai is isolated from the time axis of other dimensions, and the cleaner does not exist in any other time axis, further proving the existence of multiple time axes in Bleach, and that the Dongai is at bare minimum a 5th dimensional space in a 6D space time. So now, sticking with the Dongai a bit more, I want to mention that the Dongai is surrounded by several stacked up layers of time currents. So I'm going to give you 2 interpretations of what this can mean. Either the Dongai is 20 to 2000D, or the Dongai is surrounded by thousands of space-time continuum threads. I would personally adhere to the latter interpretation because time is inherently linked with space, and this is seen within the Bleach verse itself. When Yuha shows the infinite futures or timelines he's capable of seeing, they're represented as grains of sand, and when you look at the end of chapter sketch, you see that within these grains of sand are universes, otherwise space-time continuums. With that being said, the last point I want to make on the Dongai is that there are countless Dongais within the cosmology. That brings up to our next topic, which is the Garganta. If we continue the hierarchy, if there are multiple Dongais that are non-intersecting, then you can argue that the Garganta is a 6th dimensional structure because it would have to be qualitatively higher than the Dongai. You can also argue that it's quantitatively higher because the Garganta is stated to be infinite in size. Regardless, the Garganta should at bare minimum be a 5th dimensional structure because it contains everything within it. So in conclusion, the major Bleach dimensions are each their own space-times and have been shown to have their own isolated time axes, which are separated by a 5th dimensional space, that being the Dongai, and all of these constructs are contained within the Garganta, which is infinite in size. therefore reducing the Dongai to nothingness, possibly making the Garganta at least a 6-dimensional structure. In the next part of the video, I will be proving why the higher tiers of the verse scale to and are even above the Cosmology. And to do that, we're going to start off with the pinnacle of the Bleach verse, who is obviously the Soul King. Prime Soul King was known as Almighty, Omnipotent, and Omniscient, and as we know, he is the being responsible for creating the 3 major realms as we know them today. There was once one original realm, and he split the realm into the Soul Society, World of the Living, and Huecamundo. It's safe to assume that due to the creation of these realms, he was involved with the creation of the Dongai and the Garganta. Due to being involved with the direct creation of the microcosm of Bleach, Rio would at least be 5D and low 1C, but it stated that in order to make the division of the realms of reality, it needed the power of a man who had transcended everything, which is Rio. Logically, due to the context of the statement being a reference to a being who's going to completely bend the entire cosmology to his will, everything would be in reference to the cosmology as a whole, meaning Rio transcends the cosmology, which is perfectly consistent throughout the manga, and we'll talk about that later. A being like Rio is beyond the natural laws of the Bleachverse and is beyond the very foundations of logic. That is why he's able to perform the feats he's able to perform. Now, you can make various arguments for Rio being outer, but we're gonna remain calm today. Rio transcending the cosmology would make him anywhere from a 6 to 7 dimensional being, which is now getting close to even the complex multi-tiers. Regardless, he would at least be 5th dimensional and low 1C. After being sealed and mutilated, he still remained the linchpin of the realms, meaning he was passively sustaining the realm's existence with his power alone. As soon as he died, all the realms started to cease to exist, so even a weakened Soul King was scaled to the cosmology. Now on to U-Haul. U-Haul was able to completely absorb the power of the Soul King, and after he absorbed him, it stated that the world, meaning the Bleach cosmology, would not exist without him. From that point onwards, he was now the one sustaining the realms with his power. Guys, you should all know the goal of U-Haul Bach was to destroy all the current realms and create a new one. He has the absolute power to freely bend and manipulate the entire cosmology to his will. Not only that, but it stated the Garganta would no longer exist as well, so U-Haul was affecting more than just the realms. Based on these feats, U-Haul would also scale to a bare minimum low 1C. So now we know in a 5th and 6th dimensional cosmology, the concepts of parallel universes and multiple timelines exist. What would the abilities of a 5th and 6th dimensional character look like, and are these abilities found within the Bleachverse? So to begin, obviously a 4th dimensional character would be able to freely manipulate and move across time, as opposed to a 3D being who can only move forwards. The difference between a 4D and 5D being is that now parallel worlds and alternate timelines exist. So I'm going to show y'all a quick diagram explaining the difference. Alright, so as you can see, there is only one timeline, and in time point 1, you ate a burger, and in time point 2 is the present, right? A 4th dimensional being can go back in time to the point where they ate a burger and eat a salad instead, therefore creating a new timeline, right? The thing about this though, once they create this new timeline, this timeline ceases to exist because there is only one timeline. There's only one time dimension. There's no parallel universes or alternate timelines, right? But in the 5th dimension, that's where the existence of parallel universes and parallel timelines come to exist, right? So in time point 1, they ate a burger. Time point 2 is the present. They can go back in time where they ate a burger and eat a salad instead, therefore creating a new timeline, right? In a new universe, right? But the thing is though, this universe will continue to exist because there are now the existence of parallel universes and parallel timelines, right? But the thing is though, if this being right here wants to go back to this point, they will have to go to the original causational point where they ate a burger and continue eating a burger to go back to this point again. They can't freely move between timelines, and that's where the 6th dimension comes in. In the 6th dimension, a being is capable of freely moving between timelines. They can jump from this timeline to this timeline, and they don't have to go back to this original causational point right here. And they go back, and they can go back to like any timeline. They can just jump from timeline to timeline without having to go back to the original causational value, which the 5th dimensional character does. And if you look at the Bleachverse, you'll see that they are 6th dimensional, and I'll explain why in a bit. Alright, before I move on, I want to explain to y'all the difference between a character having a higher dimensional existence and a higher dimensional power or higher dimensional AP. A character who has higher dimensional existence, for example 4D, would exist throughout time. And a character who has 4D power does not have to exist throughout a certain time period, but can freely manipulate the time dimension or even travel backwards and forwards in time. It all depends on the fictional verse, but these are all fictional concepts. A character can be 4D in existence yet still be seen by 3D beings, but only in a singular time frame that they exist in. In the Bleachverse, it's sort of a mix between the two. These characters can manipulate and interact with time and the concept of parallel timelines, and they can also exist within multiple timelines as well. A Bleach character's existence would directly be tied to their Ryoku and Ryatsu, so if that is higher dimensional, then their existence would be as well, which is why lower dimensional characters cannot sense them. Alright, so now we're going to look at the hierarchy of power within the Bleachverse, starting off with Shinigami being 4D. Now, I don't completely agree with this, but this is a concept I just want to put out there for people. The Sai, who is just a normal Shinigami, is capable of spatial and temporal manipulation. In the manga, he's able to stop time, and time stop is considered forbidden for Shinigami to use. This means that Shinigamis are capable of manipulating time with Kido, which would mean they have capabilities of a 4D character. Some might write time stop off as simply a hacks, but given the context of the verse, I would say that is not the case. What I would say would be the pinnacle of 4th dimensional power and possibly reaching 5th dimensional levels is displayed by the Cleaner. The Cleaner is not only shown to be able to throw people off their time axis, as anything within the Cleaner is not within any other time axis, but is shown to send objects into the past and into the future. President Ichigo was able to interact with his past self, and finally is stated to have complete governance over space and time. Yuha Baku the Almighty displays powers a 6th dimensional being should have. As Yuha explains, the future does not wind down a single road, proving the cosmology is more than 4D by the way. The future diverges from a single point in time like countless grains of sand in the wind. Each and every individual's grain of sand is a future timeline. In the knowledge there is said to be infinite torrents of time and infinite paths extending to the future. Yuha is capable of seeing every single last future timeline from high above. Not only that, he can change every future timeline he sees and can do things through the future by simply changing the timeline. Now if you tally back to my diagram, Yuha Bak being above all infinite future timelines and being able to move and transform them to his will fits completely with the abilities a 6D character should have, and I'm gonna end this section here. Now ultimately, power soaking would be completely beyond anything we've seen in Bleach, considering the fact that his fragments are capable of performing some pretty good feats. For example, Yukio is able to cause rifts in space-time and speed and slow down time. Tsukishima is able to implement himself in the past of another character. Orihime's ability goes beyond spatial-temporal regression and affects causality itself. But regardless, on to the next part of the video where I talk about the popular statements that comes up when people talk about higher dimensional Bleach. All the feats I shown previously was to prove the consistency in my interpretation of these statements. Aizen absorbed the Hogyoku, which has the ability to manifest the user's deepest desires in order to become a supreme being. Through the Hogyoku, he acquired transcendental power and was transforming himself into an existence that transcended everything, shattering the planes of the divine and the mortal. As I stated earlier, the context of everything would be the cosmology as well as the capabilities of Shinigami and Hollow. In the chrysalis stage, he stated that he can understand and attack, but he can't receive damages because they are not on the same plane. Ishin, Kisuke, and Yoruichi are incapable of sensing him. It's like there's nothing there. The only person that could have felt him at that point was someone in the same state. After the chrysalis stage, it's stated that Aizen was moving on to the end of science or reason. And the manga again states that the Cleaner is a being of reason, not a being of Ryatsu. Aizen proceeds to casually destroy it just by looking at it and states that reason is for those who cannot live without clinging to it. It's also stated that Aizen's power goes beyond human knowledge. In the data book, it states that Aizen destroyed the Cleaner, which governs time and space, in order to show that his power surpasses even reason. Aizen is beyond the universal concept of reason and logic and is now a supernatural being. He proved that he is beyond the natural laws of the Bleachverse and casually destroys something that has control over space and time. And even disregarding all the other feats I've mentioned about the Cleaner, this is at least 4D. It's clear as day that when Aizen mentions transcendence, it's not some simple Ooga Booga power level of transcendence. Kubo's implications are about dimensional and logical transcendence. At this stage, Aizen is at least 4D, and after getting attempts to kill Aizen, he evolved into a being that surpassed even Shinigami and Hollow, which means at this point Aizen should be 5D. Just like how everyone couldn't feel Aizen's Ryatsu after evolving, Aizen could not feel Dongai Ichigo's Ryatsu because he was on a higher plane than him. Although his conclusion was incorrect, when comparing his and Ichigo's evolution, he does so on a dimensional scale. After noticing the difference in power, Aizen evolves into his final transformation. At this point, Aizen should certainly be at least 5D. It's not until Ichigo uses Magetsu Bugetsu, Aizen still not feeling any Ryatsu does he realize that Ichigo is in a higher dimension than the one he's currently in, which would be the 5th, and Ichigo is in the 6th. It directly correlates his evolutionary transcendence to 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional entities. Considering all the statements and feats I've brought up, there is literally no more ways Kubo could have described dimensional transcendence without blatantly saying Aizen and Ichigo is 4D or some shit. You literally have to be the most dense and biased person in existence to deny the evidence, and yet Bleach fans have been gaslit for years into believing they are stupid for even bringing up the idea. Transcendence is undeniably related to dimensional transcendence, and it's not just some power level sort of thing, which wouldn't even mathematically make sense. Just because a character has higher Ryatsu than another being doesn't mean they wouldn't be able to sense them. Obviously, there is an inaccessible cardinal that these beings surpassed, which makes them stand on a higher plane, which is dimensionality at its finest. The last thing I will mention is that in the beginning remarks of chapter 421, it states now time ends when Ichigo activates Bugetsu. And also in the chapter sketch, Kubo writes cutting through time. People write this off as wordplay from Kubo. I believe Kubo is literally saying Bugetsu has the ability to cut through time, which is what he would need to do in order to render a higher dimensional being such as Aizen to nothingness. In this form, Ichigo is a 6th dimensional being, and in 1000 Year Blood where he regains said dimensional power in order to defeat the Quincy King U-Haul. That's all for this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, make sure to like, comment, and share this video around. It's time the community comes to accept and realize the true power of Bleach, and that Bleach is truly higher dimensional. And I'll see y'all next time.